Depression doesn't disappear when I run away. It just changes form. And one day I realized, either I walk inward or I continue to be dragged down by the emptiness. That's when I encountered the teachings of Arai Kiyoko, the silent geisha who said that the heart only heals when we stop running from it. And today, I want to tell you exactly what I learned. Stay with me until the end, because a single insight can give you back control of your own life. The moment I realized I was running away from myself. For a long time, I tried to push away the pain using every avoidance strategy I could find. Endless distractions through bright screens that hypnotized me for hours without registering a single moment. Excessive work that kept me too busy to feel anything deep. Superficial relationships that filled the time but didn't touch the soul. Compulsive consumption of entertainment that numbed but never healed. I had built an elaborate fortress of escape mechanisms, each meticulously designed to keep me at a safe distance from any real emotion, any genuine pain, any confrontation with the emptiness that grew inside me. My entire life had become a military operation of avoidance. Every hour of the day planned to ensure I was never alone with my own thoughts long enough for them to catch up with me. I would wake up and immediately grab my phone, filling my brain with news and social media before even getting out of bed, as if building a wall of noise between myself and any morning feeling that might emerge from the silence. Throughout the day, I rushed from one task to another, from one meeting to another, from one distraction to another, always on the move, always busy, always doing something, anything, so I wouldn't have to stop and feel the weight I was carrying. I prided myself on my productivity, my full schedule, my inability to stay still. I told others and myself that I was just an active, energetic, ambitious person. But the truth I hid even from myself was that it wasn't energy. It was a desperate escape. I was running not towards something, but away from something, specifically away from myself, from my pain, from the depression I refused to name or acknowledge. Each frantic activity was just another way to avoid sitting with the emptiness, another way to avoid admitting that something was deeply wrong inside me. At night, when exhaustion finally forced me to stop, I had developed equally elaborate escape rituals, binge-watching series until I fell asleep so I wouldn't have to confront my thoughts in the dark, scrolling through endless feeds until my eyes closed on their own. Anything to avoid those terrible moments of silence before sleep where the truth could seep in. Weekends were the worst because there was less external structure to hide behind, so I filled every hour with plans, exhausting social engagements, projects I started but never finished, always movement, always noise, always something between me and the abyss I felt. Growing but refused to look directly at. I had become an expert at self-medicating through distraction, and for a while, it seemed to be working. For a while, I managed to convince myself that I was okay, that I was just busy, that I was living a full and active life. But the more I ran away, the more depression caught up with me, like a shadow that grows the longer you try to run from it in the sunlight. It manifested as fatigue that no amount of caffeine could resolve, an emotional void that no amount of entertainment could fill, a growing disconnection where I felt more and more like a ghost in my own life, physically present, but absent in any meaningful sense. My escapes stopped working. TV series no longer distracted me. Work became mechanically exhausting without bringing any satisfaction. Social interactions left me emptier than before. It was as if my entire system was collapsing, all my coping mechanisms failing simultaneously, finally forcing me to confront what I had been avoiding for so long. I needed to admit the hardest and most liberating truth at the same time. I had been running in the wrong direction all this time. Every step I took away from my pain was actually a step deeper into it. Every distraction I sought was making the depression stronger, not weaker. Every time I refused to feel, I was feeding exactly what I was trying to kill. The only way out was to stop running completely, turn around, and finally face the darkness I had spent years running from. It was terrifying, the idea of stopping my escape mechanisms and simply sitting with everything I had been avoiding. But some deep part of me knew there was no other real choice. I could keep running until I completely destroyed myself, or I could stop, turn around, and finally face my own pain. And it was when I encountered Arai Kiyoko's teachings that I understood that stopping running wasn't giving up. It was the only real way to begin healing. Arai Kiyoko's teaching: pain only listens when you stop running. Kiyoko used to say that running away from pain is like trying to put out a fire with wind. It only makes it worse. When I first encountered this teaching of hers, recorded in the memoirs of her apprentices, something inside me trembled with recognition. Arai Kiyoko was a geisha who had traversed her own deep darkness after losing everything in a fire that destroyed her okiya and killed people she loved. She could have completely lost herself in that tragedy, and, for a time, she almost did, trying every possible way to avoid feeling the magnitude of her loss. But it was only when she completely stopped trying to escape the pain, when she finally allowed herself to sit with it, to feel each devastating wave of it without trying to push it away, that something began to change. And this wisdom she distilled from her own journey through hell, that running away from pain only intensifies it, resonated with me because I was living the proof of this truth in my own life. The metaphor of fire and wind was perfectly and devastatingly accurate. Every time I felt the pain of depression beginning to emerge and immediately ran to a distraction, grabbing my phone, turning on the TV, immersing myself in work, anything to create wind against the fire. I wasn't putting anything out. I was feeding the flames, giving them oxygen, making them grow bigger and more intense. The wind of my escape spread the fire to areas of my life that hadn't yet been touched. What began as localized depression at certain moments became something that contaminated absolutely everything because I kept trying to blow it away instead of confronting it directly. Kiyoko understood something fundamental about the nature of emotional pain. It doesn't go away by being ignored. It only grows stronger, more insistent, more destructive, like a child being ignored who screams louder and louder until finally heard. When I finally stopped running, when I made the terrifying decision to simply sit with my depression instead of running from it for the 1,000th time, I don't know what I expected. Perhaps to be completely swallowed, destroyed by it, totally lost in the darkness. But what happened was different and unexpected. In the first moments, the pain was overwhelming, yes. Waves of sadness so intense they took my breath away, a feeling of emptiness so profound it seemed bottomless. But as I stayed with it, not trying to change it, or escape it, or rationalize it, just allowing it to exist, something began to happen. The pain began to take shape, began to have a voice, began to make sense in ways it never had while I was running. It was as if, by stopping running, I finally created space for the pain to fully express itself, and in that full expression, it began to reveal its hidden messages. Pain was able to speak for the first time in years, and what it had to say was both devastating and profoundly necessary for me to hear. It spoke of needs of mine that I had ignored for years, a need for true rest, for authentic connection, for meaningful purpose, to process old traumas that I had buried but never truly healed. It spoke of parts of me that I had abandoned in the frantic race of life, my creativity, my vulnerability, my capacity to simply be instead of always doing. It spoke of relationships that were draining me, of work that was slowly killing me, of a life I was living more out of inertia and external expectations than out of conscious choice aligned with my inner truth. Pain was not my enemy trying to destroy me. It was a desperate messenger trying to save me, trying to awaken me to truths I needed to confront, but had been avoiding through years of constant escape. And that's when I discovered what she wanted to show me, that I was living a life that was fundamentally misaligned with who I truly was and what truly mattered to me. Depression wasn't a random chemical malfunction in my brain, although biological components certainly existed. It was an intelligent response from my entire system to a life that was betraying me, an alarm siren indicating that something needed to radically change. Kiyoko had understood this when she traversed her own darkness, that pain has intelligence, has purpose, has crucial messages that we can only receive when we stop running long enough to listen to them. When I finally listened to my pain without filters or escapes, it showed me exactly what needed to change. Not just superficial symptoms, but deep structures of my entire life that were slowly suffocating me. And paradoxically, it was in the moment of greatest vulnerability, when I stopped fighting and simply allowed the pain to show me its truths, that I found the first real spark of hope I had felt in years. Because now, I knew what was wrong. And knowing is always the first necessary step to being able to change. Observing my own thoughts without becoming immersed in them. I learned to see my thoughts as passing clouds, not as pronouncements. This practice, taught by Kiyoko and refined through her own journey through depression, was one of the most difficult and transformative I have ever incorporated. For years, I had treated every thought that arose in my mind as absolute truth, as unquestionable reality, as a definitive decree about myself and the world. If my depressed brain thought, "You are worthless," I believed it as if it were verifiable fact. If it thought, "Nothing will ever get better," I treated it as an infallible prophecy. If it thought, "You are failing at everything," I accepted it as a fair and accurate judgment. I was completely identified with my thoughts, with no space between the thinker and the thought, without any ability to distinguish between the content of my mind and objective reality. My thoughts were my reality, and when those thoughts were dark, depressive, mercilessly self-critical, my entire reality became dark as well. Kiyoko taught a radically different distinction. Thoughts are not you. They are not truths. They are not orders you must obey. They are transient mental events, like weather passing across the sky of your consciousness. You are the sky, not the clouds. You are the conscious space within which thoughts appear and disappear, not the thoughts themselves. This idea sounded absurd to me initially because I was so fused with my thinking that separation seemed impossible. How could I observe my thoughts? I was my thoughts. But Kiyoko insisted that this separation was not only possible, it was essential for any kind of psychological freedom, especially for someone going through depression where thoughts become particularly vicious and compelling. She guided me through a simple but profound practice. When a thought arises, especially a negative thought about yourself, observe it as you would observe a passing cloud. Notice it. Name it. Ah, there's a thought saying I'm worthless. And then crucially, do nothing with it. Don't fight it. Don't believe it. Don't analyze it to death. Just let it pass, like a cloud crossing the sky. I started practicing this in small doses because doing it consistently was impossible at first. My depressive mind generated negative thoughts with machine gun-like frequency, and trying to observe each one without diving in was exhausting. But I started with the most obviously destructive thoughts, the ones that sent me into deep spirals. When the familiar thought, "You should give," was up, "Nothing is worthwhile," arose. Instead of immediately believing it and letting it drag me down, I paused, I breathed, and I said to myself, there's the thought of giving up again. Interesting. Here it goes. In the first few days, this felt forced, artificial, as if I were lying to myself. The thought still had enormous power over me. But slowly, with patient repetition, something began to change. There began to be a tiny space between the arising of the thought and my reaction to it. A millisecond of awareness where I could choose not to board that specific thought train. When I stopped believing everything my mind told me, the weight began to lessen. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, consistently, like ice melting under gentle sunshine. The weight of depression had been largely composed of the tyranny of my own thoughts, the constant torment of an inner voice that relentlessly attacked me. But when I began to recognize that this voice was just another mental phenomenon, not an absolute truth, not an accurate reflection of reality, not a prophecy I was obligated to fulfill, its power over me began to weaken. It was like discovering that the terrifying monster that haunted me was actually a shadow projected on the wall. It might still seem frightening, but it couldn't truly hurt me once I understood its true nature. I learned to categorize my depressive thoughts as mental climate rather than objective reality. It's raining negative thoughts today. Instead of, "My life is objectively terrible," there's a storm of self-criticism passing through instead of, "I am genuinely worthless." This shift in language, however subtle it seemed, created crucial distance. Climate passes, storms end, clouds move. And if my depressive thoughts were mental climate, then they too would pass, no matter how permanent they seemed at the moment. Kiyoko had weathered her own mental storm after her tragedy, and she emerged knowing that thoughts are like temporary visitors, not permanent residents. You don't need to serve tea to every thought that knocks on your door. You don't need to invite each one to sit and stay. Some thoughts you can simply observe through the window, acknowledge their presence, and then let them continue on their way without ever opening the door. And it was this practice of detached observation, of consciously creating space between myself and my thoughts, that began to break the hold that depression had over my mind. I still had depressive thoughts many of them daily, but they no longer had me. And that difference, however subtle it may be to describe, made all the difference between being a slave to depression and beginning to find freedom even in its presence. Accepting the slow pace and seeing strength in it. Depression made me slow down, and I hated slowness with every fiber of my being. I had spent my entire life at high speed, proud of my ability to multitask, to move quickly from task to task, to be productive, efficient, always moving forward. Speed was a virtue in my mind, and slowness was failure. Then when depression came in and slowed everything down, my thoughts became foggy and slow, my physical movements heavy as if I were walking underwater. Simple tasks that once took minutes now took hours. I felt constantly humiliated by my own slowness. I got out of bed slowly. I showered slowly. I made coffee slowly. Every action required monumental effort and took forever. And all the while, there was an inner voice mercilessly criticizing me for being so slow, so unproductive, so different from the efficient person I used to be. I fought against the slowness, trying to force myself to speed up, mentally whipping myself to go faster, feeling intense shame about how long simple things now took. But I learned from Kiyoko that slow pace wasn't my enemy or my weakness. It was exactly what my soul desperately needed and had been denied by years of frantic speed. Kiyoko, after her tragedy, spent months moving at an extremely slow pace, doing one thing at a time with complete mindfulness, refusing to be rushed by external expectations or her own inner impatience. Her teachers and colleagues worried she would never recover, but she insisted that the slowness wasn't depression destroying her. It was her body and soul imposing the necessary rhythm for true healing. She said we spend our lives speeding up, accumulating unprocessed traumas and pain because we don't have time to fully feel and process in the moment, so everything is stored in the body, waiting for an opportunity to finally be digested. And depression, in that view, was often that opportunity. A forced period of slowness where there was finally space and time to process everything that had been swallowed, unchewed during years of speed. Slowness is where the soul breathes, where it can finally expand after years of being compressed by constant urgency. When I stopped fighting my slowness and began to accept it, even honor it as necessary, something profound began to happen. I discovered that when I did things slowly, truly slowly, with total presence, there was a completely different quality to the experience. Taking a slow shower became a ritual of care instead of a task to be completed quickly. Making tea slowly became meditation instead of a means to an end. Walking slowly allowed me to truly see the world around me for the first time in years instead of just passing through it in a blur. Slowness created space to feel, to process, to be present in ways that speed never allowed. And in that space, old emotions began to surface and be released. Old patterns began to be seen and questioned. Truths about my life began to emerge that I would never have accessed if I were still rushing. And where I finally rebuilt my strength, paradoxically, wasn't by speeding back to my old pace, but by honoring slowness until genuine strength naturally emerged from that place of deep rest. The Pai's Kai. Strength I had before was borrowed strength. Strength manufactured through caffeine and willpower and denial of limits. It was unsustainable and eventually led me to collapse. But the strength that began to grow through accepting the slow pace was different. It was rooted, solid, based not on denying my limits, but on respecting them. It was like the difference between a plant forced to grow rapidly in a greenhouse versus a tree growing slowly at its own pace that develops deep roots and a strong trunk that can withstand any storm. Kiyoko emerged from her months of slowness not weaker, but stronger in ways she had never been before. A quiet, unwavering strength that didn't need to prove anything because it was so deeply rooted. I learned that allowing myself to be slow wasn't indulgence or laziness. It was radical self-respect in a culture that treats bodies and souls like machines that should operate at constant speed without ever needing real maintenance. It was rebellion against the tyranny of productivity that told me my worth was directly tied to my speed and output. It was ancient wisdom recognizing that all living things have rhythms, have seasons, have times of rapid growth, and times of slow, invisible, but equally vital, subterranean growth. Winter is no less important than summer, just because nothing seems to be happening on the surface. And my depressive slowness, when I stopped fighting it and started working with it, revealed itself not as death, but as a necessary winter, a time of retreat, of deep healing, of rebuilding foundations. Kiyoko taught me that true strength often appears slow to the untrained eye, that the deepest growth happens in the dark and the silence and in the patience that our noisy, hurried culture mistakes for weakness. And when I finally honored my own slow pace instead of whipping it to speed things up, I found not only peace with my depression, but a path through it that respected my humanity instead of trying to transcend it through brute force, transforming small rituals into daily anchors. Hot tea, soft light, tidying a corner of the room, small rituals gave me grounding when everything else seemed to be crumbling around me. On the worst days of depression, when waking up felt like an insurmountable mountain, and living through the day seemed impossible, I found that grand goals or ambitious plans only crushed me with their weight. Fixing my entire life was paralyzing. Complete healing seemed unattainable. Being productive was a cruel expectation that guaranteed failure, but small rituals, tiny actions I could do, even on the darkest days, these became my lifesavers. Kiyoko had emphasized the importance of daily rituals in her own recovery. Not grand heroic gestures, but small acts of care repeated with gentle consistency. She would wake up every morning, and no matter how devastated she felt, she would make her bed, open the window, light incense. Just those 3 things. Some days, that was all she could manage. But she did them. And those tiny actions created structure where everything else was chaos, created a sense of control when everything seemed out of control. I started with tea. Even on days when I couldn't do anything else, I would make a cup of hot tea. Not just absent-mindedly throwing a tea bag into boiling water, but a small ritual, consciously choosing which tea, heating the water, watching it boil, pouring it over the leaves, observing the color spread. Through the water, feeling the warmth of the cup in my hands, inhaling the aromatic steam before the first sip. This ritual took perhaps 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes were an island of presence in an ocean of darkness. They reminded me that I could still create something, still take care of myself even in a tiny way, still experience pleasurable sensations even when joy seemed completely inaccessible. Tea became my morning anchor, something my body began to anticipate, something that gave me a tiny but real reason to get out of bed. Then I added light. I realized I was living in constant darkness, curtains closed, lights off, hiding in the shadows as if I only deserved shadows. So I started a light ritual. Every morning, no matter how I felt, I opened the curtains and let the natural light in. If it was night or a cloudy day, I lit a candle or a soft light. Just this simple act of bringing light into my space changed something in me. It didn't cure the depression, but it created a slightly less oppressive environment, acknowledging that I deserved light even when I felt like pure darkness. Kiyoko spoke about how physical environments reflect and influence internal states, and that small changes in the external can create openings in the internal. Light wasn't a magic solution, but it was a gesture of self-care, a recognition that I was still alive and deserved to occupy illuminated space instead of burying myself in darkness. Tidying up a corner of my room became my 3rd ritual. Not the whole room. That was too much. Just a corner. My bedside table, or the chair by the window, or a small surface. I would remove the accumulated clutter, dust, maybe put a flower in a glass, or intentionally arrange a few objects. It took 10 minutes at most, but it created a point of order amidst the chaos. A place where my eyes could rest without seeing mess and neglect reflecting back at me. This clean corner became reclaimed territory, visual proof that I could still do. Something still had agency, however minuscule. Some days, looking at that tidy corner was the only moment of relief, the only place where things made sense and were under my control. I realized that gentle discipline heals more than any brute force. This revelation was profound because it contradicted everything I had believed about how to deal with difficulties. I had always approached problems with force, pushing harder, demanding more of myself, rigid and relentless discipline. But this approach only made depression worse, making me feel even more like a failure when I couldn't force myself out of it. Small rituals taught me a different way. Discipline that was gentle, consistent but compassionate, a structure that accommodated weakness instead of punishing it. Making my tea every morning was discipline, but it was gentle, forgiving even on the worst days. Opening curtains was a commitment to myself, but it wasn't punishment. Tidying a corner was intentional action, but it wasn't a cruel demand. This gentle discipline accumulated over weeks and months into a solid foundation upon which true recovery could be built. Brute force would have broken me. Consistent kindness remade me, piece by piece, ritual by ritual, day by day, until I looked around and realized I had built a life again from crumbs of self-care that had become building blocks of healing. Silence as a form of profound healing. Kiyoko said that in silence the heart reveals truths that noise hides. Throughout my life, I had filled every moment with sound, constant music, background television, podcasts while doing chores, conversations to fill uncomfortable silences, anything to avoid the emptiness of silence. And when depression arrived, my first reaction was to turn the volume up even more, to try to drown out the inner darkness with ever louder external noise. But it didn't work. The noise only created more chaos, more fragmentation, more dissociation from myself. It was only when I encountered Kiyoko's teachings on the role of silence in healing that I began to understand that silence was not an emptiness to be feared. It was sacred space where true healing could finally happen. Kiyoko had spent long periods in almost total silence during her recovery, not as punishment or forced isolation, but as necessary medicine for a wounded soul that needed stillness to regenerate. I started with small doses of silence because total silence was terrifying at first. 10 minutes in, the morning without any external sound. No music, no notifications, no human voice, just me and the silence. In those first few minutes, my mind screamed with discomfort, desperately wanting something to cling to, some external stimulus to distract it. Intrusive thoughts surged louder, unprocessed anxieties emerged. The temptation to grab my phone and break the silence was almost irresistible. But I stayed, breathing through the discomfort, letting the silence simply be. And slowly, session by session, something began to happen. After the superficial layer of mental agitation subsided, there was something deeper waiting. An inner stillness that never had space to emerge when I was constantly bombarding my senses with external stimuli. In that stillness, I began to hear whispers of my own inner wisdom that had been completely inaudible under the constant noise. In the silence, truths I had been avoiding began to reveal themselves with crystal clarity. Truths about relationships that weren't serving me, but that I maintained out of fear of loneliness. Truths about work that was destroying me, but that I clung to out of fear of failure. Truths about self-destructive patterns that I compulsively repeated, but had never stopped long enough to acknowledge. The constant noise of my previous life had protected me from these inconvenient truths, had allowed me to remain in denial, had given me an excuse not to confront what needed to change. But the silence was an unforgiving mirror that allowed no escape. In the silence, I could no longer pretend. I could no longer distract myself. I could no longer avoid what my heart was desperately trying to tell me. And although these truths were often painful to confront, there was also profound relief in finally admitting them. The silence also revealed something unexpected and precious. Moments of peace I had forgotten were possible. Between waves of pain and difficult revelations, there were instants of pure stillness, where there was no thought, no intense emotion, only simple existence and presence. In those moments, the depression didn't disappear, but there was space around it, like a clearing in a dense forest where light could enter. In those moments of profound silence, I touched something within myself that was untouched by the depression, a basic awareness that observed everything, including the depression, but wasn't defined by it. Kiyoko called this the silent observer, the part of us that remains calm even when everything else is in turmoil. Accessing this silent observer through consistent silence practice gave me an inner refuge that no external distraction could ever offer. It was in the silence that I realized I still wanted to live, even without the strength at that moment. This was the most important and surprising discovery that emerged from the practice of silence. In my darkest days, when suicidal thoughts visited with frightening frequency, when the idea of continuing to exist seemed unbearable, There was a very quiet voice, almost inaudible beneath all the noise of depression, that still whispered, "But I want to see what happens next." In the chaos and noise of my life, this voice was completely muffled. But in the profound silence, I could hear it. It wasn't a voice of robust hope or confident optimism. It was something more subtle, more persistent. It was a basic curiosity about life, a tenuous thread of will to exist that hadn't been completely extinguished by depression. This discovery in silence saved me on multiple occasions because it reminded me that even when I had no strength, even when I saw no logical reason to continue, there was something deep within me that still chose life. The silence allowed me to hear that vital whisper that the constant noise had buried, and hearing that whisper made all the difference between giving up and continuing for another day and another, until days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months of still. Being here, still breathing, still slowly walking through the darkness towards something I couldn't yet see, but that quiet voice promised existed. The inner path, walking inward, to finally walk outward. The biggest turning point was understanding that the way out wasn't escape, but through. For so long I had conceptualized healing as escape, as getting out of depression, as leaving it behind, as returning to a previous state where it didn't exist. I wanted to jump over it, go around it, find a shortcut around it. Anything but going straight through it. The idea of going deeper into the darkness when I was already suffocating in it seemed absolutely insane, counterintuitive, even dangerous. But Kiyoko and all the teachings I found about true healing pointed in the same terrifying direction. The only way out is through. Not around, not over, not escaping to some brighter place. Through. Walking directly through the center of the wound, through the heart of the pain, through the depths of darkness I had spent years trying to avoid. This truth was both devastating and strangely liberating. Devastating because it meant there was no shortcut. Liberating because it meant that stopping the fight and simply going through was a valid option. When I walked inward, when I finally stopped resisting and began to intentionally move toward the center of my pain instead of running from it, something profound changed. I stopped asking, "How do I make this go away?" and started asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" I stopped treating depression as an enemy to be defeated and began treating it as territory to be explored, as a messenger carrying vital information I needed to receive. I started asking questions I had never asked before. What in my life led me to this point? What truths about myself have I been avoiding? What needs have I been neglecting? What parts of me asked to be heard and were silenced? Walking inward meant sitting with these questions without seeking quick answers or easy solutions. It meant being willing to confront painful memories, destructive patterns, uncomfortable truths about choices I've made and the person I've become. For my pains, for the places inside me that had been bleeding for years, but that I had only put band-aids on instead of truly cleaning and healing them properly. Childhood pains that I never processed, only buried and carried. Pains from relationships where I lost pieces of myself, trying to be what others needed. Pains from betrayed ambitions, from unrealized potential, from years lived according to someone else's script instead of my own. Each of these pains had been patiently waiting to be acknowledged, fully felt, and released. But I had never given them that space because I was too busy running, too busy distracting myself, too busy building a life on the surface while the foundations rotted. Walking inward meant finally stopping and giving these pains the attention they deserved, not because it was pleasant or easy, but because it was necessary for any true healing to happen. To my shadows, to the parts of myself that I had rejected, denied, hidden because they didn't fit the image of who I thought I should be. My anger that I repressed because good women don't get angry. My ambition that I diminished for fear of being seen as aggressive. My vulnerability that I hid because weakness seemed dangerous. My creativity that I stifled because it wasn't practical enough. Each rejected aspect of myself had become a shadow, living in the underground of my psyche, consuming energy, creating internal conflict that contributed to depression. Walking inward meant illuminating these shadows, acknowledging them, reintegrating the parts of myself that I had exiled. It was daunting work because it meant becoming more complex, more contradictory, less easy to define. But it also meant becoming more whole. To my truth, to who I truly was beneath all the layers of conditioning, expectations, social masks, and carefully constructed self-presentations. At the deepest center of the journey inward, after traversing pain and shadows, there was a fundamental question waiting. Who am I really? Not who my parents wanted me to be, not who society said I should be, not who I constructed to receive love and approval, but who I was in my purest essence. This truth was simultaneously simple and profound. And when I finally touched it, when I finally found that silent center of authentic identity that had been waiting for me all along, I found something I hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. Not hope based on changing external circumstances, not conditional hope that if I just did X or Y, everything would be all right, but fundamental hope, rooted in the discovery that there was a real me beneath all the pain, beneath all the depression, beneath all the fragmentation. And that real me wanted to live, wanted to grow, wanted to flourish. Depression hadn't killed it. It had only buried it, under layers of unprocessed pain and unlived truths. And now, having bravely walked inward through everything that frightened me, I had found him again. If this inward journey resonated with you, if you recognize that you've been running away when you need to cross over, you're not alone on this path. Sign up for the Geisha Path in the next videos. I will guide you through specific practices to walk through your own darkness with the wisdom of the master geishas who walk this path before us. Leave a comment. What part of this journey touched you the most? Are you ready to stop running away and start crossing over? The path outward goes through within, and you have the courage to walk it.